What's up, bookworms? This is Megan coming at you with another Cantina conversation. Today's episode features a chat with Beth Duke. We're talking about her book, Anywhen. That book is available now. So, this book is a dual timeline, but it's historical fiction, but also sci fi because the present setting is in the future. And it was just a really cool concept, really original, where it's, kind of if you're born in the year or if you're alive in the year 2100, but you have the ability to go back and meet one of your ancestors in the year 1970, let alone at Woodstock. That's the idea. Like, you would probably go, right? I don't know if I would go. I probably would. But that's kind of the premise of this book. So it was really cool to talk to Beth about her research that she did. She visited the sites of Woodstock. She visited New York and she talked to people who were there. And I just really enjoyed getting to know her thoughts on her research and just her experiences in general. And I think you guys will like it too. So without further ado, here is Beth. So today we've got Beth Duke. We are talking about Anywhen. That book is available now. Beth, thank you so much for joining me today. I just finished this book yesterday. It's fresh in my brain. An easy read, a fun read, unique presence, like unique premise. And it was just like, it was so fun getting to know the characters and trying to figure out where it was going to go. I enjoyed it a lot and I appreciate we'll dig a little bit deeper today.
Great. I'm just thrilled to be here, and I'm so happy that you just finished it. So it's probably fresher in your mind than it is mine, which is fabulous. That's great. I'm so glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, are you like you've got a couple projects since then where you're like, oh, okay, I like gotta refresh yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Everybody asks if I'm working on another book yet, and I tell everyone, I go through a phase after I finish a book where I swear I'm never going to write another book as long as I live. So I'm in that phase right now. It won't last, but that's where my brain is at the moment. But I also meet with a lot of book clubs about other books I've written, so I have to reshuffle and get into Anywhen mode, which it makes me really happy to get to discuss it with you.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. Yeah. No, that's fun. That's fun that you kind of like rehash and not just for your own like you have some space and you can reflect on it, but then also get pick other people's brains about it. That's so cool.
Yeah.
So, before we get started, can you give like a summary of the book so that people, if they haven't read it, they can follow along with the conversation?
Yeah, Anywhen is the story of a young woman named Basie, rhymes with Daisy, who was born in the year 2069 in a very utopian futuristic society. And 2069 is the 100th anniversary of the Woodstock Music and Art Fair in 1969. And there's this overwhelming nostalgia for all things hippie and flower power and bell bottoms and for the music of the era. And her mom dresses as a hippie and wears flowers in her hair the whole time she's pregnant. And Maisie grows up with the knowledge that Woodstock was a really cool thing. And she also has a worshipful attitude about her great 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 grandmother who attended Woodstock and was also there for the very beginning, the dawn of artificial intelligence and research at MIT. So she gets an opportunity to time travel, and the place that's an absolute natural fit for her is to immediately decide to go to Woodstock. So she time travels to Woodstock and looks up this great 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 grandmother, Kelly, whom she's been just dying to meet. Things don't go exactly as she anticipates. She ends up falling in love with someone at the festival and has to make a lot of very difficult choices. But it's been called a front row seat to the most legendary music festival of all time. I did a tremendous amount of research, actually visited the site, did a lot of digging into Woodstock. I sometimes feel like I was there at this point. And I think it really transports people to that, which was a really important era in the United States. It was a time of great division and tumult, and the counterculture really showed what they were about and communicated to the world what they believed in through Woodstock, through the music, and through the gathering of almost 500,000 people. So I think it's a real cultural touchstone for us, and I love telling people about it. So that's in a nutshell, that's what Anywhen is about.
Yeah, and I love it because it was such like it does. It's like you're touching on like the what if, and then you're touching on the what was, and making a connection with that, and also just like exploring, oh, it is like a time capsule for readers too. Like that was before my late 80s. I don't even know if my parents were born in the 50s, so it's like they would have been like, I don't know, 10 or 15 years old when all that went down, which may so they it is in their history, in their generation, in their lifetime, but I just Woodstock was so iconic for the reasons that you just laid out. And it was just like it was like it was once in a lifetime thing, and it was almost like even if they try to repeat it, it's not going to be the
Well,
same.
no,
And because it was such like, well, you touched on these points too, where it was such a pivotal time in America where there was so much like unrest because of Vietnam and all that stuff. And one thing that I didn't realize until I've read other works was that like how much thousands of American men saw it, like just flew to Canada because either they didn't want to be drafted or they didn't believe in the war. And Canada was totally like, we get it. It's okay. And like, we've seen it. We've got a process for this.
yeah,
And I just thought it was like, there were so many layers to it. And I appreciated like how you roped all of that into this one woman's story of where she only knows one life. She doesn't know a controlled life, a very, like, emotionally controlled, a climate
yeah,
controlled life, and it's just there's no need. She's got everything anything she needs or wants, and then she just embarks on this journey to meeting your heroes, and then it's like a rude awakening, and I it was just, like, such a fun ride, and there's just so much to be said about all of that. So, I do wanna piggyback into your research, like you said, like, the research of it, and I think I did see images from like the back of the book when you like your author's note and stuff like that where you visited the places and you were like you were in physically in the zone and all that stuff. So I want to explore like the research. Did you approach it the same way as your previous books, and anything that you surprising that you learned, stuff like that?
yeah, there were a lot of really big, surprising things I learned along the way. And I got more and more, it was a rabbit hole I went down, and I got more obsessed with what Woodstock was like every day because writing historical fiction is familiar to me. I've written books that take place in the 40s, but something this recent and something this monumental in U.S. history was really interesting to dive into. And there's all kind of cool stuff. Like I found out very early on that the promoters of Woodstock invited Roy Rogers to close the festival with Happy Trails, which I thought was the most bizarre thing. And of course, he said no. But when you think about it, it makes sense because the people Woodstock grew up with Roy Rogers and the cowboy thing and Dale Evans. There were all really cool things. One other celebrity story that I think is interesting is that this was the beginning of Carlos Santana's career. He was 22 years old. He had been playing in bars in Tijuana right before this festival. And before he went on, Jerry Garcia,
I love that.
yeah, Jerry Garcia gave him a hit of acid because he thought he was going to be going on hours later. And then they pushed Carlos Santana out onto the stage. And if you watch him playing during the song Soul Sacrifice, he has said in interviews numerous times that he thought his neck of his guitar was comprised of writhing snakes and he couldn't even look at it. And it was one of the best sets they've ever played. But
And he's still
yeah, I just find that absolutely fascinating. But another thing that was very interesting to me, I've interviewed a number of people who actually were attendees at Woodstock, and we all think of the stereotypical hippies, and that was absolutely not the case. You had 15, 16, 17, 19-year-old kids, many of whom had nothing to do with even marijuana, who just came for the music, came for the social significance of Woodstock. They were all like minded. They all wanted to be pro peace, an end to the war in Vietnam, and to make their voices heard. And they were very much unified in that. And I think that's a beautiful story as well. But it was very interesting to me to find out that the people I thought attended Woodstock, a lot of them were just high school kids that weren't necessarily like the hog farm with the hippie culture that showed up there. There was a different side to it, and people who never had anything to do with drugs at all while they were there. It was more a spirit of taking care of each other because they thought there were going to be 100, 150,000 people. Gates fell down, and all of a sudden you have almost 500,000 without enough food for them, with very adverse weather conditions, and people shared what they had and took care of each other. And I love that. You had 3 days of peace and love and sharing, and it was a really neat moment. Another thing I found really interesting about Woodstock.
It's just another thing like how unexpected that was.
Yeah,
Like anybody who was attending didn't really plan on it. Was just it was natural. It was organic. It was like everybody's there just peace and being helpful and looking out for one another. I just thought that was so fascinating how that just happened naturally for so many people that were there.
yeah, and there wasn't any incident of violence, any incidents of violence. There wasn't any real disruption throughout the whole thing. Another thing I thought was fascinating is you had these young people who were protesting the Vietnam War, who were advocating for peace, who were very suspicious of the U.S. government and U.S. military. But when they were starving because there wasn't enough food to go around, the United States military was flying in helicopters full of food. And the people surrounding that area in Bethel, New York, where the festival was held, didn't want the hippies there, wanted nothing to do with it, but they all got together and made sandwiches and shipped them in there for these kids who were hungry. And it just, everybody came together. And I think that's a beautiful moment in American history. I really do.
It was because it's like something as simple as making sandwiches. Yeah, what we just get an assembly line and we make a bunch of sandwiches for people who they need food and they're not. And I guess it was like, yeah, like people, the community who didn't want them there, but then maybe they realize like, okay, yeah, it's just the natural whatever's going to happen when there's like a huge large group of people in, like you said, adverse weather conditions. But really they weren't there to cause trouble. They were just there to enjoy themselves and to just exist and to enjoy the music and to enjoy the community, even as so diverse that community at that concert was, at that festival was. I thought that was like, and it's this thing where it's a shame where it's that, like I said, it's almost never going to be replicated again today. I can't imagine that ever being the case where the government will be like, oh, you know what, these are like concert goers in need and let's help them out. That's like unheard of. I feel like that would never happen. That would never happen today. And it's just so fascinating to me.
And they've tried to duplicate the conditions. They tried to do Woodstock in 99. That was terrible. It was a disaster. They've tried to do it again. And there are a lot of people who are dedicated to preserving the history of the festival. One of them is Dr. Neil Hitch at the museum at Bethel Woods, which is the Woodstock Museum essentially. And they are collecting oral histories from people who attended it because these folks are in their 80s now. So we want to preserve their experiences. And
I know, right?
yeah, so they discovered so much about this love and peace. And of course, nobody remembers mud. They don't remember rain. They don't remember being hungry. They remember the peace and the unity and everybody getting along and what a magical moment it was. And I think a lot of them realized that after they were there. But they really left there feeling like they had made a difference. They had been heard. And I think they were heard. Maybe not the way they wanted to be at first, but eventually they very much were. And it heralded in a new era of philanthropy and social services in this country that hadn't necessarily existed before. And that was that generation, the Woodstock generation. And I think there are some parallels to a divided country now and a divided country over the centuries in America. And I just think it's a beautiful moment when everybody comes together, and music is a unifying force. There's no doubt about it.
Oh, it really is. It's so crazy. And I loved how you name dropped a bunch of performers in there. Like you kept it relevant. We're like, no, this is the timeline that we're following. And I love Aerosmith. So it was really funny how you snuck Steven Tyler in there. Like just these little things, these little moments that you like snuck in there as they're navigating this 3-day thing. It really does. It's helps the reader, at least for me, just immerse myself and be like, follow along with the vibe.
I can't tell you how exciting it was for me to discover that Steven Tyler was there. I had no idea, and I just ran into that when I was doing research.
How did that, like, yeah, how did you find that
I had to
out?
go digging back into what he was doing at the time and what his band was called at the time and how long before they made Aerosmith. I think there's something in the book where he says to my character Jack something like, "You got to dream until your dream comes true." I don't think I'll get in trouble for that. I certainly hope he doesn't get mad that I said he smoked pot. Let's talk. I think that's okay. But that was really fun to get to throw him in, and he was.
I think there's worse things that are he's worried
Yeah,
about, I
I think
think,
so too. Absolutely, yes.
That's hilarious. That's so funny. Yeah, no, I was excited because I'm like, I don't know, like I said, like my dad and my parents are they grew up in the 70s or in the 60s, I would say in the 70s. I was born in the late 80s, so they were already like 30-ish years old, almost 30. And so, but I know even this goes true with a lot of generations. Maybe some generations will grow up listening to what their parents' generations listen to just hearing it in the house or in the car in the radio. And that's why like I grew up like appreciating Aerosmith and appreciating the Beatles. And like with Santana, I had no idea that was Santana's like first like breakthrough. I love that because I just remember first hearing Santana. It was like you took the reader and like through the characters, how they were like, he was different. He was different than probably maybe what people would have expected, but people were still digging it. People were still digging his new sound and his new style. And I love that because it was like some of his songs and his guitar solos are like just so classic, and just the performances are just like something to be remembered. And that was a bit like nostalgic just for me and like living vicariously through those experiences. And so that's really cool that you were like you had to do your digging and you had to figure it out, and then you also had to figure out how to put that on the page, you know.
If you're like me, I love reading historical fiction because I like to be entertained but learn stuff at the same time. So it was really fun to get to throw in some
Yep.
interesting facts. One of the things that came up when I was researching this too that I think is a fascinating aspect of this that I didn't think about before was that Woodstock, the 60s essentially, came on the heels of the 1950s, where you had post war America, where basically everyone had the American dream. They bought their houses, they had 2.2 children, a boy and a girl. It was extremely conservative. It was prosperity, it was the blessings of a great economy. And you had music like Frank Sinatra and whoever else was popular in the 50s. And then this huge cultural shift happened in the early 60s. You've got Elvis swiveling his hips all of a sudden. You've got rock and roll is starting.
Yep.
And it had to have been the most stunning thing to the parents who were watching this happen. And parents did what parents of teenagers always do, they freaked out. But I think that's probably one of the biggest shifts in
Yep.
cultural attitudes that this country has ever seen, going from the 50s to the 60s.
I love that because I remember reading about there were like networks who weren't sure about televising Elvis's performances. At least they had to do it from the waist up because they were worried about the scandal. And I love that because I also appreciate how far like music and performances and just how society's like reaction, because like it's a human thing, right? It's human behavior. Like we're curious about these things and we want to explore, we want to push the buttons, we want to push the limit. And there's nothing wrong with swiveling your hips to the rhythm, but it was just like, oh my god, pearl clutching,
Oh,
no.
yeah.
But then it fast forward, yeah. It's fast forward 50 years and it's, oh, Elvis swiveling his hips, that's not this. No, we're paying attention to the big picture. We're just like, no, that's not what we're focusing on. We're focusing on how his rhythm is matching his music and his performance. It's a whole thing. Like it's so funny how like how much that has shifted, but I appreciate it like all the same. I love it. I love it. It's so funny. So, like maybe switching gears, I think I've already okay. So there was some, as much as the supportive and the camaraderie, the whole theme of like camaraderie and stuff that was coming along with the Woodstock Festival. There's also some like sensitive stuff going on because I'm thinking like I can't imagine me and myself going and like just trusting this random stranger to watch my friends. You know what I mean? Like just some stuff like that. So how did you like navigate some of those tricky topics, like knowing how today's readers are aware of, with just inserting the realness of how things were back then, or just like the sensitive themes of, because it's like there's not many trigger warnings in there, but it's like there's some stuff that like maybe you have to be careful. I want to explore how maybe how to navigate that stuff and like previous experience, like previous real things that happened, and translating that for today's readers, stuff like that.
Yeah, I didn't feel like there were very many trigger warnings because it was such a more innocent time, even with the drug use and everything else that was going on in 1969. I think people were by and large much more trusting Sexual crimes, things of that nature, really weren't such a big thing. And I don't think it was that big a worry. Although there were certainly tons and tons of kids at Woodstock whose parents did not know they were there or had forbidden them to go there, and they went anyway. You had a high school kids that sneaked out and went there. So
Yeah.
this book is actually probably the least of anything I've written in terms of trigger warnings and things to watch out for readers. I do think it was a much more innocent time, even in the 60s. I think some of that 50s attitude carried over a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's fun. Because yeah, I imagine how you touch on historical fiction because I do appreciate the historical fiction aspect of you're entertained, but you also feel like you're a little bit smarter when you're finished. And just like it gives you insight that not a lot of that you can't really get other than in reading historical accounts. But even if you read history, it doesn't take into account like the context of it necessarily, like the emotions or like the events, like the individual feelings, the individual experiences is like the collective. And so that's kind of like yeah, because you did touch on like the drugs and you did touch on maybe a little bit of like the brief love triangle but the drugs, it was funny. It was especially when we see like our beloved Kelly, she is like, I loved it. It was like I want to explore that, like how like putting her into this compromising situation of this logical, cold, just matter of fact, no nonsense person finding herself in like the opposite situation that she would ever be a part of, and just expanding her mind and painting the sky. I love that. I want to explore like how you like came up with her situation, how you explored her experience like that.
I really thought it would be fascinating to juxtapose Kelly's personality with Baisie's because there were such different. Baisie, even though she's from a very different environment, she's very much a bohemian kind of free spirit, and so was the majority of the population at Woodstock. But because she had a history in mathematics, because she was on the first stages of computer research, I felt like she would have a very, not staid, but very reserved personality. I think, honestly, if Kelly were in 2025, she might be referred to as neurodivergent. She was a little bit different. She reacted differently to a lot of situations. And I think that was an interesting juxtaposition with Baisie and her outgoing nature. So that was fun to write. And obviously, you take someone like that and plunk them down in Woodstock, which is just chaos. It was fun to explore very much. But her playing off Baisie and vice versa was very interesting, looking at the two different personalities. And everything I write and everything I've ever written as an author is women's fiction at its heart, which is an emotional transformation within a character due to external circumstances and a journey or an odyssey, if you will. And that certainly happened for Baisie, who is known as Sarah at the festival, but it also happened for Kelly. She was a very different person by the end of this book. And I loved seeing the transformation that she went through as well as what Baisie went through. And they helped each other get there, which I thought was really beautiful.
Yeah, yeah, 'cause it's almost I wouldn't say that I disliked Kelly. It was like I totally understood where she was coming from. I totally understood where because she knows one thing and she cares about this thing. She's very goal and career oriented, and then like her, she's growing up in a time where there's so much free spirited vibes going on, and she was just like no nonsense, and she was just like, okay, no, I'm not interested in that. But then her coworker, no, come on, and
Yeah,
then she does, and then she's just fine, I'll be there, but I'm not. She wasn't embracing it until she did, and I feel like yeah, there's something to be said about throwing your characters. I love it when authors throw their characters into, they just put them in uncomfortable situations, characters who are so sure of themselves and who are so confident, and then authors who just throw them into a situation where they're just out of their element. And they're not familiar with the situation. They don't know how to like, and they're usually coping mechanisms or skills or personality traits just don't work. I love that. I love
I,
when authors do that. I love like watching Kelly do that.
I
Yeah.
that too. And it's the ultimate outsider story when you have this woman from the future who's from this incredibly sophisticated society, very advanced. She knows everything. She knows everything she wants to know. But you put her at Woodstock, and all of a sudden she's mangling every idiom, every expression. She doesn't know how to act around anyone. And I think that's one reason the book works. I had people tell me they think that her naivete and lack of understanding of where she was, even though she was so sophisticated, is really a great part of the story. And then Kelly, in addition to the fact that Kelly was so hyper competent, I loved looking at what her work environment was like, because I honestly think a lot of women now don't understand what it was like for women in the 60s and 70s, particularly in an area, a field, anywhere in STEM, but certainly in early computer science. She had to put up with this boss who was saying, you can't be the director, you can't be in charge, you're going to go off and have children, we can't have that. And that was legit what it was like for women then. So that was very interesting to me. And I loved,
And that would not fly today.
no,
Yeah.
no way. But it was like that. It really was. There was a time when women couldn't own property or have a credit card in their name or anything else in this country. And we're not far removed from that now. So that was really interesting.
I know. And even speaking about like public opinion today, veering off on that, it's like when I see so much like of the public opinion, especially from men and even today's women who are like embracing and defending that role, that traditional role. And it, girl, like you're allowed to get a credit card in your name because of things that the women in the past have fought for.
Yeah.
You, if are you comfortable going back to that? And it's no, absolutely not. And it's just, I've trust me, and it's so crazy because it was like you're absolutely right. It was like just the 70s when women were allowed to get their own property and not when things were breaking away from women depending on a man to be self-sufficient. It was like the system that was built to where a woman couldn't sustain herself. And it's now there's so much conversation going around where like with men who are upset that women want to be single, like women are like they're complaining that women are just single and they're happy about it. It's like, yeah, because don't if you're not enrich our lives, we don't need you. We're happy by ourselves. We're sustain. We got our entertainment, we've got our friendships, and we've got anything else that we need out of ourselves. And if you're not adding to that, we're not interested, and that's totally fair. And it's like men are unfortunately not. They're not responding. They're not well to that, and it's just dude. You're telling on yourself, and it's just there's a conversation like that I love, and there's also a conversation where it's like trying to just speak to other women and be like, no, the reason that you have the freedom to choose between traditional and non-traditional, the reason that you're choosing that you enjoy it because you're not being forced into it is because of women like the trailblazers like Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Steinem. There's just like all these women activists out there who have been fighting and fighting so that you yes, you have the choice. You're enjoying it and you're fighting for it because you chose that versus you're being forced into that. And I love that. I love that juxtaposition where, yeah, like Kelly, she was struggling with that. And it was just like to put that commentary in there to be like, no, this is real. And men felt fine expressing that in words.
Yeah.
Like, nobody's going to follow, nobody's going to listen to you. Nobody wants you as a boss. And you're going to go off and marry and have children. So we can't have you continuing this work. It, what? But that was the reality of it.
And it's unimaginable to us now. Now that's a lawsuit. So thank God we are where we are, because it was really and truly like that. And it was important to me to get that across and how much things have changed. So that, thank goodness it's historical fiction now. It's like in the past. But
Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, yeah. I want to explore maybe a little bit of the love triangle because it's like Jack, I liked Jack and he was just like he cared for her, but it was just like the slow burn. What do they call it? The slow burn
Yeah.
between Jack and Sarah. And then it was like, but I also felt for Kelly, but then it was also as a reader, I was listening and paying attention to Sarah because she knew things. She was playing on her knowledge, but also being very delicate about the knowledge that she knew. And then once things start playing out, it was just like, oh, and it was just like, it was kind of like playing with that timeline. And you're approaching the threshold of not only playing with people's emotions or like navigating characters' emotions, but then navigating their trajectory as well. And so I kind of want to explore how you navigated that, how you came up with that, where the story took you, where the story took, where your characters told your characters told you to do, stuff like that.
Yeah, I have to be so careful not to give things away because there is a pretty big twist in there, and I don't want to reveal anything about that. I loved the forbidden nature of Kelly and Jack's relationship. I loved that she couldn't allow herself to fall in love with him and vice versa, and they were in a position where they really couldn't have that happen. So that made it more interesting to me as a writer and as a reader. But it, like you're talking about, it very much unfolded at the keyboard that they were going to get together. I knew that they would be drawn to each other and that she was carrying knowledge that was going to be a real impediment to their relationship. So I, without giving too much away, I really loved that aspect of it. And I loved Jack as a character. I thought he was just absolutely great looking, great guy. And I wanted to cheer for him and I wanted everything to go right for him. And it was just really fun to write.
I know. Yeah. Yeah, because he was just like has this looming responsibility, like looming thing over his head where he knows he's possibly likely going to get drafted, and he's not he's making plans, he's taking steps to not have that be his life. And that says a lot about this is his last kind of hoorah, this is his last kind of chance to just be with his friends and enjoy himself and enjoy once in a lifetime experience. And then, oh surprise, he ends up meeting this woman that has a hold over him. And I felt for him and I felt for his journey, and I was like, oh, like readers we're led to think that it's gonna go one way, and then it's, oh, okay, let's see what let's see where this is gonna go.
Yeah, if you're like me, I love a twist. I have to have a really good twist at some point in every book I read. So I loved making that a little bit twisty, turny. We got into it. And Kelly, as
Yeah,
part of that love,
yeah, I know.
we all have sympathy for Kelly and how she felt. And it was very difficult for her to express her emotions. And I can't say too much about how things worked out. I'm one of these people that goes through life with a very optimistic attitude, and I feel like everything turns out the way it's supposed to in the end, no matter how horrible it looks up front. I really believe that, and that we all impact each other without even knowing we've done so in a good way. So that's something that kind of is a thread that's woven through every book I write. And I feel like that's true in this book for sure.
That's a healthy outlook too, because it's like when you go through big changes in your life or you put your characters through big changes, it's like you just have to, like, yeah, this is gonna suck. This is gonna suck. Just deal with it, because it's not gonna suck forever, and you never know what's gonna happen
Yeah.
in a couple weeks or in a month or whatever. Like, you never know what's next for you. That's all we have. Like, the more healthy way to look at it is that, yeah, this sucks, and just let it suck and just do your best to handle it and then go from there.
You get through it and see what's on the other side. And it's 5 year rule. Let's see how this looks and how much this matters in 5 years from now because things are going to be very different. So I like to look at it that way and examine that as a concept.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the reasons I wrote this book, and I don't know if we're,
Absolutely.
but I, for many years now, have been meeting with book clubs regularly. I wrote a book in 2018 called It All Comes Back to You, which was like hugely popular with book clubs all over the country and in Canada. And it's been translated for European distribution. I've actually met with people overseas about it. So I really got into this book club.
Oh, that's so fun.
Yeah, and I love these women. I have met so many wonderful women, smart, funny, intelligent, fun women all over the country. So one of the things I set out to do with this was make a book that would be fun for meetings, for bell bottoms and daisy headbands and pineapple upside down cake and stuff like that that was incorporated into the book that I'm hoping will make for really fun book club meetings because book club women are the best as far as I'm concerned. So I was a give back to them, dedicated to them. And
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, you did introduce like a lot of like conversational topics. For sure.
definitely.
Definitely.
You have Basie in this futuristic
No, that
society.
was my thought.
Oh, I'm sorry. I loved the concept of Basie.
No, that's okay. That's why she found my treat and she was like, yeah. Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I wanted to introduce some topics that would truly be controversial to talk about. And you have her in this futuristic society in which she introduces in the first chapter that they have eliminated racism because everyone is the same race. They've eliminated hunger because everyone is fed the same thing every day. And there are all these aspects of this futuristic society that she sees as having fulfilled what the Woodstock generation dreamed of: absolute peace, harmony, no strife. And it's interesting to talk to book clubs about, particularly the racial thing. Would we be better off if we were all the same, if we all looked the same, if all of our traits were blended into the very best of each of us? Which I have very strong feelings about that. I think maintaining our individuality is a wonderful thing, but there are others who don't necessarily lean that way. So introducing topics like that, along with all of the controversy of the 1960s, I think makes for really interesting things to talk about. And of course, Basie comes from this society that.
Yeah, and oh no, I was just gonna say that it's really interesting because Basie's society eliminated racism because everybody looks the same, but that's arguably what racists wanted. It was just like they so what was it? So many of Hitler's like Nazism was we eliminate the lesser thans,
Yeah,
and so the society can focus on advancing
yeah,
humanity, humans. And they it's like if you guys just ignored that, you could have been advancing society this whole time without worrying about something as trivial as skin color or religion or whatever and or disabilities or whatever. And so I thought that was such an interesting thing because okay, is it a utopia or unity? Is it really like we don't but because you guys don't know, because you guys don't know any better, you don't know anything
exactly.
different, so you're not introduced to those things that made it so controversial. And so I thought that was like it was also something to think about as well.
It was. And how boring would life be if we were all the same? If we all had the same interest, if we all did the same thing every day, if we all had the same. It just, to me, I thought was a very interesting way to look at it. And of course, you can look at Hitler, you can look at eugenics, you can look at all the horrible experiments that have taken place over the years, but that wasn't my intention. I was talking about scientists who basically wanted to take the best of each segment of the population and their genetic strengths
Yeah.
and put them all together to what you might want to refer to as a superhuman. But it eliminates the strife and the struggle. And I'm not in favor of it, but it was interesting to me to take a look at what it was like in Basie's time. I love controversy.
Yeah, yeah, because it's yeah. It makes for good storytelling and it makes for like some juicy bits of your story. It's just like going back to what can we throw at our characters? How can we create this divisiveness and see what the characters how they come out of it?
Yeah, and that's all part of the book club thing. I've had book clubs tell me they sat and argued for 2 hours over all of this that took place in the future and what took place at Woodstock. So that makes me really happy. That's built in for book club discussion. When I lived in Florida, which was the majority of my life, I was in a book club, which is the thing I miss most about Florida other than my family. And I love that. I love having something that you can dissect and argue about and feel differently about and represent your point of view. So that's really where I was trying to go with that.
In a mature way, right?
Yeah.
Not so much, oh, you're wrong and you're a horrible person for thinking this way. And it's, yeah, just exploring it into a respectable manner of it. Just be
Exactly.
like,
Yeah.
oh no, I didn't like this. I didn't like that. Well, that's okay.
Yeah.
Just,
Respectful discussion. I will listen to anyone's point of view. It doesn't have to be my own, as long as it's respectful. And I think we learn a lot from each other that way. Everyone brings something to the table, everyone has a
oh,
different
absolutely.
perspective. And fiction is an empathy engine. It puts you in other people's shoes, and I think that's a fascinating aspect of it.
I know. I just I wish I think that's a lot of what people may not realize is like there's There's just so many possibilities, and there's millions of, as cliche as it is, it's like there's millions of stories to tell, and there's a million ways to tell it. And it's just, World War II from America is going to be different than World War II from Europe. And it's like that in and of itself is going to be such a different like contrast. And it's so fascinating. And it's just, there's no harm in hearing everybody out and to like exploring all these different types of storytelling and all these different stories and all that jazz.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. We all have our own perspective that we bring to everything, and it's a good thing to sit and listen to other people and how they feel about things that they may see completely differently than you do. And that's at the heart of a lot of book clubs. At least
Yeah,
I've been to. Yeah, definitely.
100%. So, what were the most challenging parts to write? What were the most enjoyable parts to write?
I loved writing Sarah and Jack finding each other and falling in love at the festival. I loved writing Sarah mangling expressions like "I'm falling for you" became, I think, on you, things like that. That was a really fun part of the book for me to write. And I try to put a little humor in everything I write because I think that's great. You need a little comic relief. So Sarah definitely provided my comic relief with her misunderstandings of American idioms and phrases and slang. So that was a lot of fun. I can't really talk too much about the hardest part of the book to write because it would be a spoiler. But there was certainly a separation involved and a lot of pain and a lot of anguish, and that was difficult to write for sure. But I'll give too much away if I go into it too much.
Yeah, that was like definitely a turning point in this story where it was like, oh no. I was like, no.
Yeah, that was really hard to write. That was difficult.
It's like, yeah. Yeah, and it's just when you follow these character journeys, and then when stuff like that happens, you're just like, you're like, no, I can't, that can't be.
Yes,
So let's see, what do you hope readers get out of Anywhen?
I hope people walk away with an understanding of what the 1960s in the United States were like and how powerful unity and the message of unity is in our society today as it was in 1969. I hope that they're entertained and amused by Woodstock in 1969 and learn more about it and what happened then, because I really do think it's a cultural touchstone that's still relevant now and will continue to be for a long time. I certainly hope people are amused by it and find it funny, but also are very involved emotionally with the characters and invested in them and find them memorable. That's always my hope with any book that I write. And the overarching thing that I mentioned earlier is that I want this book to be special to book clubs. I want them to take it and dissect it and have fun with the controversial topics in it and the emotional journey of all the characters, but also have fun with flowered headbands and bell bottoms and 60s food. So I think it could make for fun book club meetings, and that's really the intent behind the whole thing. So those are the major things. I also, as you and I talked about earlier, the topics that we've touched on, I want people to understand what it was like for women in the 1960s in the professional marketplace. I want people to understand how things have changed and how far we've come, and maybe contrast the way things were in 1969 with how they are now and how they could be in 2101, where Basie goes back to. I think we are on a road that is very interesting in terms of artificial intelligence. One of the first people I heard from who read this book worked his entire career in computers, and particularly with a concentration on artificial intelligence. And he told me that it was so refreshing to read something where there's a positive look at AI and its influence on the future and having it harnessed to make people's lives better, as opposed to the dystopian, horrible, terrifying scenes that we have seen displayed with AI. So I'm very hopeful. I think I'm one of those definitely glass half full types who believes that AI is going to be a great blessing in our lives. But the technology is growing by such leap bounds so quickly that we're going to see a very different society society in 20 years from now. I really think have a huge impact, and I think it's going to be a good one. I want Alexa to do everything. I'm sorry I said her name out loud now, but we depend on so many of these odd things, and it's so primitive at this point that 20 years from now will be a very different scenario, and I'm very sanguine about it. I think it's going to be a great thing for society.
Yeah, I think that's also for me personally, I'm a little bit terrified of AI and its capabilities just because there it's like I feel like a healthy skepticism about it because you never know what people will do with it. And it's, we should there's like this tool that our day and age has a hold of, and there's so many. It's like like the world is our oyster, right? With AI, and it's just like as much as it could potentially be used to like manipulate people, it should equally be used to like detect diseases better than humans.
Exactly.
Like just for science, simulations that will actually help predict things or help people better than like AI art is one